The first thing Madison Blake noticed wasn't the music or the glittering chandeliers. It was him. Dylan Mercer, her ex-boyfriend, standing tall and smug across the ballroom. His arm wrapped around a woman in a silk dress that screamed expensive. His eyes flicked across the crowd and landed on her with that same arrogant smirk she once mistook for charm. Hi family, please subscribe to my channel before we continue the story. Have you subscribed? Are you sure you subscribed? Please, subscribe to my channel to help me grow. Now I trust you've subscribed. Thank you. Now, shall we continue? Madison's stomach twisted, but she refused to let her face betray even an ounce of the storm brewing inside her. She hadn't come to the wedding to see him, hadn't even known he would be here, but life had a cruel sense of humor. Tonight was supposed to be her best friend Maya's big night, not a rerun of Madison's heartbreak. She lifted her champagne glass and forced a smile, but Dylan's smirk widened, and then, just to twist the knife, he leaned down and kissed his fiancée right in her line of sight. It was a kiss meant to wound, meant to remind her that he'd moved on while she was still standing in place. Madison's fingers tightened around the glass, and that was when a low voice brushed her ear like velvet. If you don't stop glaring, people will think you're plotting murder. She spun, nearly spilling her drink, and found herself staring into eyes the color of stormy seas. Connor Hayes. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew the type, too handsome for his own good, tailored suit that probably cost more than her rent, a lazy grin that suggested he was used to being the center of attention. But unlike Dylan, there was something in his gaze that disarmed her, something teasing but not cruel. Maybe I am. She shot back before she could stop herself. Connor chuckled, sliding smoothly into the space beside her as if they'd known each other for years. Well, if you're going to commit a crime, you might as well have an accomplice. Shall we make them nervous? He tilted his head just slightly toward Dylan and Sabrina, who were still holding court on the dance floor. Madison's heart skipped. He thought she was glaring at random strangers. Good. Let him think that. But then Dylan's eyes flicked back to her, and Madison saw it. The satisfaction, the challenge. He wanted her to squirm. He wanted her to crumble. And she refused. Her mind scrambled for a weapon. She needed to flip the script. She needed Dylan to choke on his arrogance. So before reason could intervene, she slipped her hand into Connor's. His brows lifted in surprise, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his grip tightened, warm and sure. Smile, she whispered, her lips barely moving. My ex is watching. The words tasted wild on her tongue, a reckless gamble thrown into the fire. For a split second, Connor looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Then, to her astonishment, his grin sharpened into something wicked. Well, he murmured, lifting her hand to his lips and brushing a kiss across her knuckles. Let's give him a show. Madison's breath caught, but she didn't falter. Together, they stepped onto the dance floor, and suddenly Dylan's smirk wasn't so confident anymore. His fiancée, Sabrina, followed his gaze, suspicion flickering in her eyes, and Madison nearly laughed at the irony. One kiss, one handhold, and already Dylan looked rattled. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't even known Connor 5 minutes ago. But now, as the music swelled and Connor's hand slid to the small of her back, Madison realized she wasn't just pretending for Dylan's benefit. Part of her was pretending for herself, too. Pretending she wasn't broken. Pretending she could still play this game without her heart in pieces. Care to tell me what I've signed up for? Connor asked under his breath as he spun her with effortless grace. His cologne was warm, something woodsy and expensive, and Madison hated how easy it was to lean into it. It's simple, she replied, forcing her smile wider. You're my boyfriend tonight. He raised an eyebrow, amusement sparking. Boyfriend, huh? That's a lot of responsibility for a man who doesn't know your name. Madison, she said quickly. Connor, he replied, then leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. Don't worry, Madison. I've been told I'm excellent at improvising. Her pulse stumbled. Improvising. That was all this was. A show. A game. But as Connor dipped her low and the crowd clapped at their theatrics, Madison saw Dylan's jaw tighten. For the first time since the breakup, she felt a flicker of power burn in her chest. She wasn't the broken one anymore. He was. But victory tasted complicated. Because when Connor pulled her back up, their faces inches apart, Madison felt something stir she hadn't expected, something dangerously real. And that terrified her more than Dylan's smirk ever could. She barely had time to recover before Maya appeared, radiant in her wedding gown, her smile wide. "Mads," she squealed. "You didn't tell me you were bringing a date." Madison froze. Connor, however, didn't miss a beat. He wrapped an arm around her waist and pressed a kiss to her temple. "We like to keep things low-key," he said smoothly, his voice pitched just loud enough for Dylan to hear as he passed nearby. Maya squealed again, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. Madison's cheeks flamed, but Connor's hand never wavered at her waist, grounding her, steadying her. Dylan's fiancée, Sabrina, leaned close to her fiancé, whispering something sharp enough to make his smile falter. And just like that, the night had shifted. Madison wasn't sure how much longer she could play this game, but one thing was certain. She wasn't playing it alone anymore. And as Connor clinked his glass against hers, smirking as if they'd known each other for a lifetime, Madison realized she might have just stepped into a bigger mess than the one she was trying to escape. The champagne flutes clinked and laughter rippled around the reception hall. But for Madison, the night had narrowed to 2 points of gravity. Dylan's simmering stare and Connor's steady hand still resting against the curve of her waist. She hadn't meant for it to snowball this far. A little hand-holding, a smile for show. That was all she'd intended. But Connor wasn't merely playing along. He was performing with such conviction that half the room seemed convinced he was her longtime partner. And the more convincing he became, the more Madison realized she couldn't just let this unravel without consequence. Dylan had noticed. Sabrina had noticed. The whispers had begun to circulate already. All it would take was one slip, one wrong word, and the entire charade would explode at her face. As if sensing her spiraling thoughts, Connor leaned close again, his voice a warm brush of sound. "You look like someone calculating the trajectory of a missile." "Breathe, Madison. You'll give us away." She shot him a sideways glance, her lips curving into something that only resembled a smile. "I didn't ask you to make it look this real." "No," he agreed, eyes glittering as he lifted his glass. "But you wanted him to believe it. And he does. Trust me, sweetheart, that man is seconds away from choking on his jealousy." The casual endearment twisted in her stomach, a dangerous echo of something she used to want from Dylan but never got. She drained the rest of her champagne, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt under Connor's unwavering composure. Before she could craft a reply, Dylan and Sabrina glided past their table, stopping just long enough for the ex-boyfriend to make his presence impossible to ignore. In a while, his gaze flicked to Connor, sizing him up. "And you are?" Connor rose gracefully, offering his hand as if he'd been expecting the introduction all night. "Connor Hayes, Madison's boyfriend." The word landed like a thunderclap. Dylan's jaw twitched almost imperceptibly, and Madison's heart lurched. Connor wasn't supposed to take the lie this far. Not in front of Dylan. Not so directly. Sabrina, radiant and sharp-eyed, smiled thinly as she clutched Dylan's arm. How wonderful she cooed. "We didn't know Madison was seeing someone. She never mentioned." Connor slipped his hand into Madison's again, his thumb brushing hers with deliberate tenderness. "We're private," he said smoothly. "But when you know, you know." The phrase lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Madison forced her lips into a polite curve, but inside she was reeling. Dylan's eyes narrowed, his composure cracking just slightly, and then he nodded curtly before steering Sabrina away. Madison exhaled the moment they were out of earshot. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath. Connor leaned back in his chair, utterly unbothered, his grin infuriatingly charming. "Winning. Winning," she repeated incredulously. "Yes," he said, swirling the champagne in his glass as if they were simply discussing the weather. "You wanted your ex to squirm. Mission accomplished. But let's be honest, Madison, you're not finished. That man is going to circle you like a shark all night. And if you want to keep him at bay, you'll need more than just one dance. You'll need me." Her heart thudded. every instinct warning her against the trap in his words. "You're suggesting what exactly?" "A deal," Connor said simply. His gaze locked on hers, steady and unflinching. "I'll be your boyfriend. Not just for tonight, for as long as you need me to be. We keep up the charade, make it airtight, and you get exactly what you wanted. Dylan off balance, Sabrina insecure, and everyone convinced you've moved on." Madison stared at him, caught between shock and reluctant intrigue. She didn't know this man. She didn't know what game he was playing. But the offer was undeniably tempting. Dylan had already looked rattled after just one dance. What would happen if the illusion lasted days? Weeks? "And what do you get out of this?" she asked finally, her voice skeptical. Connor's smile curved into something sharper, almost predatory. "Entertainment. And maybe a favor somewhere down the line. Who knows? But tonight I'm bored. And you, Madison, are the most interesting thing in this room." Her stomach tightened. It was reckless. It was insane. But the thought of Dylan stewing in jealousy was intoxicating, almost enough to drown out the alarm bells ringing in her head. "Absolutely not," she whispered fiercely, though the hesitation in her voice betrayed her. "Absolutely yes," Connor countered, leaning closer. "You're already in too deep, sweetheart. Everyone here thinks we're together. If you backpedal now, you look like a liar. Worse, like you dragged me into some pathetic little scheme." Madison's cheeks burned. He was right. The whispers, the stares, the way Maya had practically squealed with excitement when she saw them together. It was already out of her control. "Fine," she muttered, "but only until the wedding's over." Connor's grin widened, triumphant. "We'll see." Before she could retort, Maya's voice cut through the crowd, calling for all the guests to gather near the stage. A hush fell over the room as the newlyweds prepared for their first dance. Madison tried to focus on Maya's joy, but her thoughts kept circling back to Connor's proposition. A deal, a fake relationship. It was madness, and yet the seed had been planted. When the music swelled and the dance began, Madison felt Connor's hand brush against hers again, deliberate and grounding. She looked up at him, ready to warn him not to push the act any further, but then she saw Dylan across the room, staring daggers at them, his fiancée tugging at his arm in vain. And in that moment, Madison knew the deal wasn't just inevitable. It was already in motion. By the time Maya and her new husband finished their first dance, Madison was no longer sure which part of the evening was the wedding and which part was the elaborate theater she and Connor were putting on. Every time she glanced across the room, Dylan was watching. Sometimes subtly, sometimes not, his expression tight and unreadable, while Sabrina clung to his arm with the forced smile of a woman who had questions. Questions Madison had no intention of answering. But Connor, he seemed to thrive under the weight of their stares. The more Dylan looked, the more Connor performed, brushing stray curls from Madison's face, whispering jokes against her ear that made her laugh despite herself, guiding her effortlessly through dances she didn't know she could pull off. And every smile she gave him, every touch that lingered just a little too long, felt like a line she wasn't supposed to cross. Except she had already crossed it the moment she'd slipped her hand into his. When the dance floor shifted into faster music, Maya pulled Madison into a circle of friends, laughing and tugging until she relented. Connor stayed close, never once letting her slip too far from reach, his hand brushing hers every time she spun, like an unspoken reminder that he was there. The circle erupted in cheers, clapping, and singing along to the band, and Madison found herself laughing harder than she had in months. For a few stolen minutes, she wasn't the girl haunted by Dylan's betrayal. She wasn't even the girl pretending to be someone's girlfriend. She was just alive. It wasn't until the circle broke apart and the music softened again that reality returned. Connor leaned against a nearby column, watching her with that maddening half-smile that seemed to see through everything. "You're good at this," he said when she joined him, cheeks flushed. "At what?" she asked, pretending to fix her hair. "Pretending," he replied simply, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "If I didn't know better, I'd think you actually like me." The words hit like a spark. She scoffed, masking the sting. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm just committed to the bit." Connor's grin deepened. "So am I." Before she could respond, Dylan appeared, Sabrina still in tow. He wore his smirk like armor, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. "Madison," he said smoothly, as if nothing in the world could shake him. "Connor." Connor's hand slid to the small of Madison's back again. The contact so natural now, it felt inevitable. "Dylan," he said lightly. "Enjoying the evening?" "Of course," Dylan said, though his eyes never left Madison. "You look happy." It was almost a question, a challenge wrapped in politeness. Madison lifted her chin. "I am." Sabrina glanced between them. Suspicion sharpened her gaze, then tugged Dylan toward the buffet. He followed reluctantly, his stare burning holes in Madison until he disappeared into the crowd. Connor's voice broke the tension. "You're welcome." She turned on him. "For what?" "For making him miserable," Connor said casually, sipping his drink. "You wanted him to squirm. He's squirming. Though, if you ask me, it's not enough yet." Madison shook her head, though her lips twitched against her will. "You're impossible. And you," Connor said, leaning closer, "are dangerous when you smile like that. Careful, sweetheart. You'll have me believing this little charade is real." Her pulse skipped. She should have pushed him away, reminded him of the boundaries they hadn't even properly set. But instead she laughed softly, the sound foreign and terrifying in her own ears, and said, "Then maybe you're not as good at pretending as you think." The rest of the night blurred into flashes. Connor drawing her close for slow dances that lasted too long, whispered jokes that made her bite back laughter, Dylan's gaze following them like a shadow that refused to let go. Every glance Connor gave her in front of the crowd was calculated, deliberate. But in the stolen moments between, when his hand lingered at her waist longer than necessary, when his thumb brushed her knuckles as if it belonged there, Madison couldn't tell where the performance ended and something else began. By the time the wedding wound down, Madison was exhausted. Her cheeks hurt from smiling, her voice was hoarse from laughter and conversation, and her heart was a mess she didn't dare untangle. She stood outside the venue waiting for her ride when Connor appeared beside her, hands tucked into his pockets like he had all the time in the world. "Well," he said, his voice softer now that the spotlight had dimmed, "that was fun." "Fun," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You call spending hours fake dating a complete stranger fun?" He tilted his head. "Stranger? I feel like I know you better than half the people I've actually dated." She snorted. "That's not a compliment." "Sure it is," he said, grinning. "Because here's the thing, Madison, you're better at this than you think. You made them believe. You made him believe. And you made me believe just a little." The confession hung between them, heavier than it should have been. Madison swallowed, glancing away. This was supposed to be one night. Connor's gaze lingered on her, sharp and unreadable. One night, 10 nights, it doesn't matter. As long as your ex is watching, we're not finished. Her chest tightened. "You're insane." "Maybe," he said easily, stepping closer. "But admit it, you're not ready to let go of this yet." She wanted to deny it, wanted to walk away and never see him again. But Dylan's face flashed in her mind, the way he'd bristled every time Connor touched her, the way Sabrina's suspicion had grown sharper by the hour. And beneath that, deeper and more dangerous, was the truth she didn't want to admit. She liked the way Connor made her feel, even if it was all pretend. Her ride pulled up, saving her from answering. Connor opened the door for her with a flourish, his grin infuriatingly confident. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," he said, leaning down just enough that his breath ghosted her cheek. "We'll talk soon." She slid into the car, heart racing, refusing to look back as the door closed. But even as the city lights blurred past the window, one thought haunted her. Connor Hayes was supposed to be a lie, but the sparks he'd ignited tonight were far too real. Madison thought she could slip back into her normal life after the wedding, pretend the night of champagne-fueled theatrics had never happened. But the world wasn't that forgiving. By Monday morning, the whispers had spread like wildfire. Her phone buzzed with messages from mutual acquaintances who'd seen her with Connor. Everyone wanted to know who he was, where she'd been hiding him, and whether she'd finally moved on. Madison ignored most of them, telling herself it didn't matter. But when she walked into her office that morning and caught two of her coworkers staring before ducking their heads together to whisper, She knew Dylan's reach extended further than she thought. And she also knew he wouldn't let it go. The confirmation came that evening, when she opened her apartment door to find Dylan himself leaning against the wall like he owned the place. Madison froze, her pulse hammering. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded. Dylan straightened, giving her the smile that once unraveled her so easily, but now only made her skin crawl. "Relax," he said smoothly. "I was in neighborhood." "That's a lie," Madison shot back. "You don't just end up in this neighborhood, Dylan. What do you want?" His eyes darkened. "I want to know who he is." Madison forced her shoulders back, channeling the same defiance she'd wielded at the wedding. "My boyfriend," she said simply. "Connor Hayes." Dylan's smirk wavered, replaced by something sharper, more dangerous. "Boyfriend, huh? Funny, I don't remember you ever mentioning him before." "Maybe because it's none of your business anymore," Madison said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. Dylan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Come on, Mads. You expect me to believe you just magically show up at a wedding with some mystery man and suddenly you're in love? It's a show, and I know you better than anyone. You don't do shows." Madison's heart stumbled, but she kept her chin high. "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." His jaw clenched. For a moment, she thought he'd push further, press until she cracked. But then his lips curved into that same infuriating smirk. "We'll see," he murmured. He left without another word, but his promise lingered like smoke in the air. Madison shut the door and leaned against it, breathless. She hadn't even caught her breath when her phone buzzed. "Connor." She hesitated, then answered. "You sound rattled." Connor's voice drawled through the line. "What happened?" Madison blinked. "How did you—" "Because," Connor interrupted lightly, "I told you he wouldn't let it go. And, judging by your voice, I was right. So, tell me, sweetheart, did Dylan come knocking?" Her silence was answer enough. Connor chuckled, but there was no amusement in it, only satisfaction. "Looks like our deal just got an extension." Madison groaned, pressing a hand to her temple. "I don't need your help." "Yes," Connor said smoothly. "You do. Because this is just the beginning. He's not going to stop until he proves me wrong. And if you falter, if you let him see through the cracks, he'll eat you alive." "So what are you suggesting?" she asked warily. "Simple," Connor said. "We make this airtight. Public outings, social media posts, enough evidence to shut him up for good. You want him off your back, Madison? Then lean into the lie. Or, if you prefer, I can walk away right now, and you can deal with Dylan and his fiancée circling you until you snap." The thought made her stomach twist. She hated admitting it, but Connor was right. Dylan thrived on control, on holding power over her even after the breakup. The only thing that had rattled him was Connor. If she wanted peace, she needed to double down. "Fine," she muttered, "but we set boundaries." Connor laughed softly, the sound annoyingly pleased. "Of course. You set all the rules you want. Just remember, rules are meant to be broken." Madison hung up before he could say more, but the damage was done. By the next weekend, she found herself walking into a bustling art exhibition on Connor's arm. Photographers snapping pictures as if they were a real couple. Connor played his part flawlessly, whispering compliments about her dress, guiding her through the crowd with easy confidence, introducing her to people she'd never met as if she belonged there. And Madison, she played along, plastering on smiles, laughing at his jokes, leaning into his touch even as her insides twisted with confusion. It should have felt fake. It should have felt staged. But every time Connor's hand brushed hers, every time his gaze lingered a beat too long, she felt something dangerous flicker in her chest. And then she saw him, Dylan, standing near the entrance with Sabrina, his eyes locked on her like a predator waiting for a crack in the armor. Sabrina was talking to someone, but Dylan wasn't listening. His entire focus was on Madison and Connor. Madison's breath hitched, but Connor didn't miss a beat. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "Smile, sweetheart," he murmured. "Your ex is watching." Her pulse stuttered, but she obeyed, tilting her head toward Connor and laughing at something he hadn't even said. Dylan's expression darkened, and Sabrina's hand tightened on his arm, suspicion sharp in her eyes. For a fleeting, reckless moment, Madison felt victorious. But victory came with a price. Later that night, as she slipped away to catch her breath, Sabrina cornered her near the gallery's courtyard. "Madison," she said, her voice sweet but laced with steel. "A word." Madison stiffened. "Of course." Sabrina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's just strange. Dylan's never mentioned Connor before, and yet suddenly here you are, parading around like you've been together forever. Almost like you're trying to prove something." Madison forced a cool smile. "Or maybe I just don't owe Dylan, or you, any explanations." Sabrina's eyes narrowed. "Careful," she said softly. "If you're playing games, it won't end well for you." Madison's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. "Funny," she whispered back. "That's exactly what I was going to say to you." Sabrina's smile faltered, and for the first time, Madison saw it, the cracks in the perfect fiancé act. Sabrina didn't trust Dylan. She suspected something, and Madison was now caught in the crossfire. By the time Connor found her again, Madison's pulse was still racing. He took one look at her and smirked. "Told you," he said. "They're both watching now." Madison swallowed hard, the weight of the lie pressing down heavier than ever. Connor had been right. The game wasn't over. It was only getting started. The following week, Madison tried to convince herself that everything was still under control, that she could juggle this charade without letting it consume her. But pretending had a way of becoming reality, and she could feel the edges between truth and lie blurring faster than she could patch them. Connor made it too easy. He didn't just play the part of her boyfriend. He embodied it. Texts in the morning checking on her, little gestures like holding the door or remembering her coffee order, the way he leaned into conversations so it seemed like no one else in the world existed but her. Every move was calculated, but it also felt natural, and Madison hated that part most of all. She needed to remember this was a deal. Temporary. A performance. Nothing more. Yet she couldn't shake the look on Sabrina's face the night of the gallery. The way suspicion had hardened into something sharper. Dylan hadn't spoken to her again, but she felt his presence circling like a shark. The tension grew heavier with each day, pressing on her until she could hardly breathe. It all came crashing down on a Thursday evening when she and Connor met for dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant. The city lights glittered below them, the hum of traffic faint in the distance, and for a moment Madison let herself relax into the illusion, until Connor set his glass down and said, "Tell me about him." Madison stiffened. "About who?" "Dylan," Connor said simply. "The ex. The one who still owns real estate in your head. If I'm supposed to play the part, I need to know what I'm up against." Her stomach twisted. She'd spent months burying the truth, stuffing every ugly detail into a box she never planned to open again. But Connor's gaze was steady, unrelenting, and something in it told her he wouldn't settle for lies. She looked down at her plate, pushing food around with her fork. "We were together for 3 years. He was charming. He made me feel like I was the only one in the room, until I found out I wasn't." Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard. "He was seeing other women, not just once, over and over. And every time I confronted him, he had an excuse, a reason, a promise. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Until one day, I couldn't anymore." Connor's expression softened, the teasing edge gone. "So he broke you." Madison's throat tightened. "I broke myself by staying too long, by thinking I could fix him when all he ever wanted was power. That's who Dylan is. He doesn't want love. He wants control. And I let him have it." She forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "So now you know." For a long moment, Connor said nothing. Then he leaned back, his eyes shadowed. "You think you're the only one who picked the wrong person?" Madison blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Connor's jaw tightened. He looked out over the city, his voice lower now, almost reluctant. "I was engaged once. A long time ago. Thought I had it all figured out. She was beautiful, ambitious, the kind of woman who lit up every room she walked into. I was obsessed. I thought she was too. Turns out, I was just a stepping stone. She used me to climb higher, to get closer to people who mattered more. The moment she didn't need me anymore, she was gone. Married someone else within 6 months. Someone richer, older, more powerful." Madison stared at him, shocked. She had never seen Connor anything but in control, smug, playful. But now his eyes held something raw, something almost broken. "I didn't know," she said softly. He gave a humorless laugh. "Why would you? I don't usually advertise my failures." Their eyes met across the table, and for the first time Madison realized the truth. Beneath the polished charm, beneath the reckless grin, Connor Hayes was carrying scars of his own. Different from hers, but just as deep. "So that's why you're helping me?" she asked quietly. "Because you want revenge on someone else through Dylan?" Connor shook his head. "No, I'm helping you because I see the same fire in your eyes I saw in mine after it all fell apart. The need to prove you're not broken. To prove you can't be discarded." His gaze held hers, unflinching. "And maybe because when I kissed your hand at that wedding, it didn't feel like pretending." Her breath caught. The air between them grew heavy, thick with something she couldn't name. She should have looked away, should have broken the moment before it swallowed her whole. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "Connor." He tilted his head, a question lingering in his eyes, but before either of them could cross the dangerous line hanging between them, a voice sliced through the air. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Madison froze. "Dylan." He stood at the edge of their table, Sabrina hovering a few steps behind him, her arms folded and her expression sharp. Dylan's smile was all venom. "I didn't realize rooftop dinners were part of your new relationship, Mads. How thoughtful of you to rub it in." Connor was on his feet instantly, his posture calm but lethal. "Unless you came to join us, you should leave." Dylan ignored him, his eyes locked on Madison. "It's funny," he said, his voice smooth but edged with fury. "You've never been one for theatrics, Madison. And yet here you are, parading this guy around like he's your whole world. Almost like you're trying too hard to convince someone. Maybe even yourself." Madison's hands trembled under the table, but she forced her voice steady. "Go home, Dylan." "Or what?" he challenged, stepping closer. Sabrina hissed his name, tugging at his arm, but he shook her off. Connor moved forward, blocking Dylan's path, his tone calm but razor-sharp. "Or you'll regret it." The tension snapped like a live wire. For a moment, Madison thought Dylan might actually take a swing. But then he laughed, cold and hollow. "This isn't over," he said softly, his gaze sliding between Connor and Madison like a blade. "Not by a long shot." He turned on his heel, Sabrina trailing after him with a look that was equal parts suspicion and fury. Madison sat frozen, her pulse pounding in her ears. Connor sank back into his chair, his expression unreadable. For the first time since their deal began, Madison realized just how dangerous this had become. It wasn't a game anymore. Dylan wasn't just jealous. He was hunting, and she and Connor had just painted targets on their backs. The rooftop confrontation left Madison shaken for days. She replayed Dylan's words over and over in her head, his smirk, his certainty that she was bluffing her way through this new relationship. It was unnerving, how he could still crawl under her skin with just a glance, just a few pointed words. And it wasn't just her he was unsettling. Sabrina's sharp stares and clipped tone whenever they crossed paths told Madison the woman was starting to suspect something too. Connor, however, seemed unaffected. If anything, he leaned deeper into the role, upping the ante as if Dylan's intrusion had challenged him to prove just how convincing they could be. Flowers started showing up at her office, elaborate bouquets with notes that made her coworkers swoon. He dropped by unannounced to whisk her away for coffee, always making sure Dylan's circles would catch wind of it. He held her hand longer, touched her lower back casually, kissed her temple like it was the most natural thing in the world. At first, Madison went along with it, grateful for his confidence when hers wavered. But as the days turned into weeks, she noticed a new problem. She was starting to care too much. She caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking, memorizing the sound of his laugh, the way he rolled his sleeves up when he got too warm, the little habits that had nothing to do with their arrangement. And worst of all, she couldn't shake the twist of jealousy that stabbed through her whenever another woman flirted with him. It happened one Friday night at a charity art auction hosted in an old library downtown. The place was filled with polished socialites, the kind Dylan thrived among. Madison had been reluctant to go, but Connor insisted, claiming it would be the perfect opportunity to keep up appearances. Everything was going smoothly until she spotted a striking brunette in a red dress laughing a little too hard at something Connor said. Madison tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself it was none of her business. But the woman touched his arm, lingering, leaning closer, and suddenly Madison's blood was boiling. Connor must have sensed it, because he excused himself from the conversation and returned to her side, a teasing grin tugging at his lips. "Jealous, Blake?" he murmured, leaning down so only she could hear. Madison forced a smile. "Not at all. Why would I be jealous of some woman who looks like she stepped out of a perfume ad?" "Because she's not you," Connor said simply, eyes glinting. Before Madison could respond, Dylan appeared out of nowhere, Sabrina in tow. He was smirking again, clearly delighted to catch them mid-whisper. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple," he drawled. "Funny, I've never seen you this affectionate, Madison. Not even with me." His voice dripped with poison, and Madison clenched her fists at her sides. Connor slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close in a way that made her heart lurch. "That's because you were never worth it," he said coolly, his eyes locked on Dylan's. The tension was palpable, an electric current humming between them. Sabrina's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering sharper, but she said nothing. Dylan, however, chuckled lowly. "Careful, Hayes. You're playing a dangerous game. Madison has always been mine, one way or another. You're just the placeholder." The words made Madison's blood run cold, but Connor didn't flinch. Instead, he bent down and kissed her. Not a soft kiss, not the kind meant to be polite or for show. It was intense, searing, the kind of kiss that made Madison's knees buckle and the room spin. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and when Connor finally pulled back, his hand still cradling her jaw, Dylan's expression had curdled into something dark and furious. "She's not yours anymore," Connor said, his voice like steel. "She never was." Dylan's jaw tightened, his knuckles white at his side. For a second, Madison thought he might cause a scene, but Sabrina caught his arm and tugged hard. "Not here," she hissed through clenched teeth. Reluctantly, Dylan allowed himself to be led away, but the look he threw over his shoulder promised this wasn't finished. Madison's heart pounded as the room's chatter picked back up, people whispering and glancing their way. She was still breathless, still reeling from the kiss that had felt too real to be an act. "Connor," she whispered, her voice trembling. He looked down at her, a question in his eyes, but before he could speak, the brunette in the red dress appeared again, smiling slyly. "Quite the performance," she purred. "Though I must say, Connor, you've always been good at putting on show." Madison stiffened. "You know each other?" The woman's smile widened, predatory. "Oh, we go way back." Connor's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. The brunette leaned closer, her perfume sharp in the air. "Careful, sweetheart," she murmured to Madison. "You never really know who you're dealing with." And then she was gone, swallowed up by the crowd, leaving Madison rattled. She looked up at Connor, questions burning in her chest, but his expression was unreadable, closed off in a way she hadn't seen before. The jealousy that had simmered earlier was gone, replaced, now, by unease. For the first time since their deal began, she realized she didn't just know too little about Dylan. She knew too little about Connor. That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, Madison's mind whirled. Dylan's obsession, Sabrina's suspicion, the brunette's cryptic words, Connor's sudden distance. It all tangled into a knot she couldn't untangle. This was supposed to be simple. Pretend for a while, make Dylan jealous, move on. But nothing about this was simple anymore. She wanted Connor in ways she wasn't ready to admit, and the thought of losing him, pretend or not, terrified her. Yet the shadows of their pasts loomed larger with every step forward, threatening to swallow them whole. And somewhere out there, Dylan was waiting, watching, plotting. The night after the auction, Madison swore she wouldn't call Connor. She needed space, time to think, to untangle the mess in her chest. But space was a luxury she didn't get, because the very next morning he was at her doorstep, leaning casually against the frame as if he hadn't detonated her entire sense of reality less than 24 hours ago. "We need to talk," he said, his voice softer than usual, stripped of the playful confidence he always carried. Madison folded her arms, trying to steady the tremor in her chest. About what? The kiss you turned into a public spectacle? Or the woman in red who seemed to know you a little too well? His jaw flexed, but he didn't rise to the bait. About all of it, he admitted. But maybe not here. Come with me. Against her better judgment, she did. He drove them out of the city, the silence between them thick but not uncomfortable. After nearly an hour, they pulled up at a secluded stretch of beach, the kind of place where the world seemed to fall away. Madison stepped out, her heels sinking into the sand, the crash of waves filling the silence. "You brought me here to talk?" she asked, her voice skeptical but softer now, drawn into the serenity of the place. Connor shoved his hands into his pockets, staring out at the horizon. "That woman, her name's Vanessa. We dated years ago, right after." He paused, shook his head. "Wasn't serious, not for me, anyway. She's the type who thrives on chaos. Likes to stir the pot just to watch what spills out. Whatever she said to you, it was meant to get in your head. Don't let her." Madison wanted to believe him, but doubts, like shadows, had a way of clinging. "Why didn't you just tell me right away?" Instead of shutting down, his gaze found hers then, sharp, cutting. "Because I don't owe Vanessa's space in my life anymore. And because when it comes to you, Madison, I don't always trust myself to say the right thing." Her heart skipped, betraying her resolve. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" The silence stretched, heavy with words unsaid. Then Connor stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, close enough that the air seemed to hum between them. "I mean that sometimes it doesn't feel like pretending," he murmured, his voice rough, stripped bare. Madison's breath caught. The world tilted, the waves crashing louder, her pulse hammering in her ears. She wanted to say something sharp, to remind him of the deal, of the boundaries. But when she looked up at him, all she could manage was a whisper. "Then stop pretending." It happened before she could think better of it. His mouth on hers, fierce and demanding, not for Dylan, not for an audience, but because the tension between them had finally snapped. Madison melted into him, her fingers tangling in his shirt as if anchoring herself to something she didn't want to lose. The kiss was fire and release, all the things they'd been holding back crashing into one reckless moment. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Connor rested his forehead against hers, his chest heaving. "Tell me that felt like an act," he whispered. Madison opened her mouth, but no words came. Because she couldn't. Because the truth was written all over her. On her trembling lips, on the way her body still leaned toward him, on the ache clawing at her chest. She wanted more. She wanted him. And that was the most dangerous truth of all. She stepped back, shaking her head as if distance could fix what they'd just broken. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice unsteady. "This isn't part of the deal." Connor's jaw tightened, his eyes searching hers like he could see straight through her walls. Maybe the deal's changed. Panic clawed at her ribs. She couldn't let this spiral, couldn't let herself fall into something that would only shatter her again. "Connor, you don't get it. Dylan isn't just some jealous ex. He doesn't let go. He won't let me go. If he even suspects this is real, he'll come for us harder than ever. And I can't." Her voice broke, and she turned away, staring out at the endless sea, hoping it would swallow her doubts. Connor came up behind her, close but not touching, his voice steady, certain. "Let him come. I'm not afraid of him, and I'm not walking away." Madison squeezed her eyes shut, fighting tears. No one had ever said that to her before. Dylan had broken her down until she believed she was only as strong as the love he withheld. And now here was Connor, reckless, infuriating Connor, offering something real in the middle of their biggest lie. It terrified her. They drove back in silence, the weight of the kiss hanging heavy between them. By the time Madison slipped into her apartment that night, her entire body buzzed with the memory of his mouth on hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was more than a role, more than a weapon against Dylan. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Someone at the auction had captured the kiss. High definition, perfect lighting, impossible to deny. Madison's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, coworkers, even her boss asking if she had anything to tell. But the one message that made her blood run cold came from an unknown number. Enjoying yourself? Don't forget, Madison, you were mine first. And what's mine always comes back to me. No name. But she didn't need one. She knew Dylan's venom when she saw it. Madison's hands shook as she locked her phone, her pulse roaring in her ears. The slip-up wasn't just a slip anymore. It was a declaration, a spark that had lit a fuse. And somewhere in the dark, Dylan was waiting for the explosion. Madison didn't leave her apartment for 2 days after Dylan's message. She told her boss she was sick, ignored Harper's concern calls, and silenced every notification except Connor's. He checked on her, persistent but not pushy, showing up with takeout and sitting with her on the couch in companionable silence when words felt too heavy. But beneath his calm exterior, Madison saw it. The flicker of anger in his eyes when he noticed how her hands trembled at every buzz of her phone, the way his jaw clenched whenever Dylan's name slipped into their conversations. "You can't let him control you from a distance," Connor told her one night, his voice low but firm. "That's what he wants. Fear is his game. And if you keep letting him play it, he'll win before he even lifts a finger." Madison wanted to believe him, wanted to soak in his certainty like sunlight. But the truth was, Dylan had already won once. He had dismantled her piece by piece until she barely recognized herself, and she couldn't shake the dread that history was about to repeat. On the third day, Harper forced her way into the apartment with a spare key and a fierce expression. "You look like hell," she said, shoving a latte into Madison's hands. "And you're not hiding forever. Dylan's an asshole, but he's not worth your life. You've got Connor now, and frankly, the way he looks at you, I'd be more afraid of breaking his heart than anything Dylan could do." Madison smiled weakly, but her stomach twisted with guilt, because the truth she hadn't confessed, not to Harper, not to Connor, not even fully to herself, was that she was already halfway there. Falling, wanting, needing, and that wasn't part of the deal. Later that evening, she agreed to meet Connor at his office, an upscale space on the top floor of a glass tower downtown. The city sprawled beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, gleaming with 100,000 lights, but Madison barely noticed. She was too busy watching him, the way he moved with quiet authority, the way his presence seemed to anchor her. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like if this were real, if she was here not as part of some twisted scheme, but because she belonged in his world. "There's something I need to tell you," Connor said suddenly, pulling her from her thoughts. His tone was hesitant, unlike him, and Madison's pulse skipped. "Vanessa!" A sharp knock at the door cut him off. His assistant stepped in, her expression apologetic but urgent. "Mr. Hayes, you have a visitor," he insisted. Connor frowned. "Who?" But then Dylan walked in, smirk in place, confidence dripping like poison. Sabrina trailed behind, but this time she didn't look amused. Her eyes were cold, calculating, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Well, Dylan drawled, glancing between Connor and Madison. "The power couple. You didn't think you could hide from me forever, did you?" Madison froze, her throat dry, but Connor stepped forward, his voice even. "You're not welcome here." Dylan ignored him, pulling something from his jacket pocket, a phone. He swiped the screen and held it up, revealing a photo that made Madison's blood run cold. It was her and Connor at the beach, kissing, completely alone. No audience. No act. "Interesting, isn't it?" Dylan said softly, eyes gleaming with triumph. "This isn't for show. This isn't to spite me. This is real. And do you know what that means, Madison? It means you've been lying. To everyone, including yourself." Madison's knees nearly buckled. Who had taken that photo? How? The beach had been deserted. Unless. Her gaze shot to Connor, but his expression was unreadable, his fists clenched at his sides. Dylan's smile widened. "You don't look surprised, Hayes. Almost like you knew this would happen." "You're insane," Connor snapped. But doubt slithered into Madison's chest. Because Connor had been distant after that night. Because Vanessa's cryptic words echoed in her ears. You never really know who you're dealing with. Dylan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss meant only for her. He's using you, Madison. Just like I did. Just like he's done before. He doesn't care about you. He cares about winning. And when he's finished, he'll throw you aside, just like everyone else. Madison's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She wanted to scream at Dylan, to tell him he was wrong, but the look in Connor's eyes, guarded, secretive, made the words die in her throat. Sabrina finally spoke, her voice sharp. "We're leaving, Dylan. You made your point." Dylan smirked again, tucking the phone back into his pocket. "This isn't over," he said, echoing his rooftop warning. Then he turned and strode out, Sabrina trailing silently behind him. The door closed, leaving a silence so heavy Madison thought it might crush her. She turned to Connor, her voice shaking. "How'd you get that photo?" Connor's jaw tightened. "I don't know." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her fear curdling into anger. "Did you know? Did you set me up?" His eyes snapped to hers, pained and furious all at once. "No, I would never do that to you. But you didn't tell me about Vanessa. You didn't tell me about half the things in your past. And now Dylan somehow has proof of us when no one else was there? How am I supposed to believe you?" Her voice broke, and she hated it. Hated that Dylan still had the power to wedge his poison between her and someone she wanted to trust. Connor stepped forward, his voice low, desperate. "Because I'm telling you the truth. Dylan's playing a game, and he's damn good at it. But you're not his anymore, Madison. You're with me." His hand reached for hers, but she pulled back, trembling. "I don't know who I'm with anymore." The look on his face gutted her. Hurt, anger, something deeper she couldn't name. Without another word, she turned and walked out, leaving him standing there in the glow of the city lights. That night, alone in her apartment, Madison stared at the ceiling, Dylan's words circling like vultures. Betrayal, lies, control. She wanted to believe Connor, wanted to cling to the way he'd kissed her like she was the only person in the world. But doubt gnawed at her like acid, and she realized Dylan had succeeded in his cruelest trick yet. He had made her question the one person who'd fought to protect her. And in that doubt, in that fracture, Dylan found his opening. Madison didn't sleep that night or the next. The photo replayed in her mind over and over, her lips pressed to Connor's, the intimacy undeniable, and Dylan's venomous words sinking deeper each time. Every message Connor sent went unanswered. Every knock on her door she ignored, curled up on her couch like hiding could somehow keep the world at bay. But Dylan's presence was everywhere. A car idling too long outside her building. A shadow she swore followed her when she left for groceries. The whispers of co-workers who had seen the photo online and speculated about her mystery boyfriend. Fear had always been Dylan's weapon, and now he was wielding it with precision. On the third evening, Harper stormed in again, fed up. "Enough," she snapped, dragging Madison up by the arm. "You're not letting that man dictate your life anymore. There's a fundraiser at the old theater tonight, and guess what? Connor's the chair. You're going." Madison tried to protest, but Harper shoved a dress into her hands and glared. "You either show Dylan he hasn't broken you, or you let him win. Your choice." An hour later, Madison stood in front of the gilded entrance of the theater, her heart pounding. The building glittered under strings of lights, alive with laughter and music spilling into the street. Inside, the crowd was buzzing, donors and socialites mingling among velvet curtains and chandeliers. And there was Connor, standing at the center like he belonged to another world, sharp in a tailored suit, his presence commanding. His eyes found hers instantly, relief and something fierce flashing in them. For a moment, Madison wanted to run. But then Dylan's voice echoed in her head, cruel and certain. "He's using you." And something inside her snapped. "No, not tonight. Not anymore." Connor crossed the room toward her, his jaw tight, as if he wasn't sure she would stay. But Madison lifted her chin, refusing to let Dylan's shadow follow her here. "You came," Connor said softly, stopping just in front of her. "Harper threatened me," she replied, forcing a small smile. His mouth twitched, but his eyes were serious. "We need to talk." "Later," Madison said, surprising herself. "For now, we make them believe." She slipped her hand into his, and Connor's grip tightened instantly, grounding her in a way nothing else could. The night unfolded in a blur of conversation and champagne, but everywhere they went, Madison felt eyes on them. Dylan hadn't shown up yet, but she knew he would. Men like him never missed the chance to circle their prey. And sure enough, midway through Connor's speech on stage, she saw him. Standing near the back, Sabrina at his side, his smile sharp as broken glass. Connor's words were smooth, practiced, but Madison could feel the current shift the moment Dylan appeared. She braced herself, waiting for the moment he'd pounce. But instead, something unexpected happened. Connor's speech veered off script. He paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze landed on Madison. And then he said, "Most of you know I don't make things personal in moments like these. But tonight I need to, because for the first time in a long time, this isn't just about business or appearances or playing the game. It's about something real." The room stilled, curious. Madison's breath caught. Connor stepped away from the podium, eyes never leaving hers. "Madison Blake," he said, voice strong, carrying through the theater. "You walked into my life like a storm, and at first I thought that's all you were allowed. Messy, temporary. But then I realized something. You're the calm after the storm, too. You're the reason I've started believing again, in love, in second chances, in the idea that maybe I'm not as broken as I thought." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Madison stood frozen, her heart thundering in her chest. Dylan's face darkened, his composure cracking, but Connor didn't falter. "I don't care who's watching or what anyone says. This isn't an act. This isn't about making someone jealous or proving a point. This is about us. And I won't let anyone, past or present, take that away." And then, right there on the stage, he extended a hand toward her. Madison's body moved before her mind could catch up. She walked through the crowd, each step heavy with the weight of eyes and whispers, until she reached him. Connor pulled her close, and the theater seemed to disappear. He kissed her, long and sure, not with desperation but with conviction, sealing his words with action. The audience erupted in applause, some gasping, some cheering, the sound echoing through the old theater like thunder. But Madison barely heard it. All she felt was the truth of him, the raw certainty she'd been craving. When they finally broke apart, she saw Dylan's face twisted in fury at the back of the room. He shoved past Sabrina, storming out, and for the first time, Madison saw something else in him. Not control, not triumph, but loss. The rest of the night blurred, congratulations and questions flying, but Madison didn't care. She clung to Connor, to the way he had just laid himself bare in front of everyone, knowing full well Dylan would use it against him. Later, when the theater had emptied and the city hummed quietly outside, Madison and Connor lingered on the stage, alone under the dimmed lights. "You didn't have to do that," Madison whispered, though her voice trembled with gratitude. Connor cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin. "Yes, I did. Because Dylan's weapon has always been making you doubt yourself, doubt the people around you. I wasn't going to let him win by letting you doubt me." Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't look away. "What if he comes after us harder now?" Connor's jaw tightened, but his gaze held steady. "Then we'll fight harder. Together." Madison closed her eyes, resting her forehead against his. For the first time in years, the fear that had lived inside her loosened its grip, replaced by something else. Hope. She didn't know what would come next. Dylan wasn't gone, and he wouldn't go quietly. But in this moment, standing in Connor's arms, Madison finally believed in something stronger than Dylan's shadow. She believed in them, and she knew the battle was far from over. The theater had gone quiet long after the last guest had left, but Madison couldn't shake the feeling that Dylan was still there, lurking in the shadows like a ghost that refused to die. Connor hadn't left her side all night. Every time she turned, he was there, steady as a wall, unflinching even as whispers buzzed about his bold declaration. He'd set a fire in the city, one that would spread in the morning papers and online columns, and Dylan would be the first to pour gasoline on it. But for now, there was silence. Madison thought the silence would soothe her, but instead it gnawed at her nerves. The theater seemed too still, the air too heavy, until the echo of footsteps broke the calm. Dylan stepped into the dim light of the stage, his tie loosened, his smile brittle. "Touching," he said, clapping slowly, his voice echoing through the empty seats. "Really, Madison, that was quite the performance. Almost had me convinced." Connor's body went rigid beside her, his hand instinctively moving to shield her. "This isn't your stage anymore, Dylan. Leave." Dylan's laughter was low and mocking. "Oh, I'm not here for stage. I'm here for the truth. Do you really think this," he gestured between them with disdain, "is going to last? Do you really think anyone buys it? You've always been desperate for validation, Madison, and you found someone foolish enough to give it to you." Madison's heart pounded, but she refused to shrink back this time. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stage floor. "You don't get to do this anymore, Dylan. You don't get to decide what's real for me. Not after what you did. Not after how you made me feel worthless. You broke me once, but you don't get to keep breaking me." Dylan's smile faltered, and for the first time, Madison saw the mask slip. He wasn't untouchable. He was furious, bitter, unraveling. "You think this man is your savior? He'll leave you just like I did. Everyone does." "Not everyone," Connor cut in sharply, his voice like steel. "Because unlike you, Dylan, I don't need to tear someone down to feel powerful. Madison doesn't need me to save her. She's already stronger than you'll ever be." Dylan's face twisted with rage, but before he could lash out, Sabrina appeared in the wings. Her eyes were red, her expression weary, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Stop it, Dylan. It's over. Whatever hold you thought you had on her, it's gone. And whatever we had," she shook her head, her voice breaking slightly, "I won't be your pawn anymore either." Dylan whirled on her, betrayal flashing in his eyes. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Sabrina replied firmly. "I watched you try to control her, and I let you use me to twist the knife. But I'm done. She deserves freedom, and I deserve better." Dylan looked between them all, his jaw tightening, his hands clenching. But in the end, he had nothing left to throw at them. No audience to manipulate. No power. Just the wreckage of his own arrogance. With one last glare, he turned on his heel and stalked out of the theater, the echo of the door slamming, behind him reverberating like the end of an era. Silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't oppressive. It was liberating. Madison felt the weight she'd carried for so long. The fear, the shame, the doubt slip off her shoulders like chains unfastened. Her knees wobbled, and Connor caught her before she could fall. "It's over," he whispered against her hair, his arms wrapping around her. "He's gone." Madison buried her face in his chest, inhaling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Tears slid down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were release. They were freedom. They stood like that for a long moment, the empty theater holding them in its quiet embrace. Finally, Madison pulled back, her eyes meeting Connor's. "You risked everything tonight," she said softly. "Your reputation, your career. For me." Connor's gaze was unwavering. "For us," he corrected. "Because what I feel for you isn't something I can hide, not even for the sake of appearances. Not even to protect myself. Madison, I love you, and I don't care who's watching anymore." Her breath caught at his words, the one she hadn't dared hope for but had needed all along. For years, she had been defined by what Dylan had taken from her. Her confidence, her trust, her sense of worth. But Connor was right. She wasn't broken. She wasn't desperate. She was alive, capable of loving and being loved in return. And she wasn't afraid to claim it. She lifted her hand to his cheek, her thumb brushing along his jawline, and whispered, "I love you too. And for the first time, I mean it without fear." The kiss that followed was nothing like the others. It wasn't for show, or for revenge, or to prove anything to anyone. It was theirs raw, tender, searing. A kiss with no audience, no ex watching, no stage to play on. Just two souls colliding in a truth they could no longer deny. When they finally broke apart, Madison laughed softly through her tears, her forehead pressed to his. "Do you realize how poetic this is?" she murmured. "All this time, every kiss we had was a performance. But this one, this is real." Connor smiled, the kind of smile that reaches eyes, warm and unguarded. Then let's promise something. No more fake kisses. No more pretending. From here on out, it's only real. Madison nodded, her heart swelling with certainty she thought she'd never feel again. Only real. They left the theater hand in hand, stepping into the cool night air. The city stretched before them, alive with possibilities. For the first time in a long time, Madison didn't look over her shoulder, didn't brace for Dylan's shadow. She looked forward, toward Connor, toward a future that was finally hers to claim. And as the streetlights bathed them in golden light, Connor leaned down and kissed her again, softly, like a vow. This time, it wasn't about anyone else. It wasn't about being seen. It was about love, pure, unshakable, real. And Madison knew, without doubt, that no matter what storms lay ahead, they would face them together. Because the best part wasn't that Dylan was gone. The best part was that she was free, truly free.